Hi, I'm Femi OK. Today on the stream, we go across the globe, catching up with Al Jazeera correspondents and the stories they're reporting. We are live right now on YouTube. If you have questions for our journalists, put them in the comments section, and Malik and I will do our very best to get them on the air.
And I'm Malika Bilal. Justice for Zainab has been trending on social media for several days now, and there have been protests on the streets. We'll hear the latest on the investigation in Pakistan. We'll also get reaction from Ramallah to the more than 1,000 settlement homes recently approved by the Israeli government.
But first, we go to a country that we haven't covered much on the stream, Costa Rica, where the homicide rate has risen greatly over the past few years. Here's some reaction from the capital city.
Bueno, se podría decir que a nivel nacional la inseguridad en el país ha crecido demasiado a través de que ha habido mucha droga. La juventud se ha perdido mucho en cuanto a eso, están perdidos en cuanto a las pandillas. La juventud está demasiado perdida y la inseguridad incrementa en cuanto a nuestros hijos, ¿verdad? Porque nuestros hijos son los que están rodeados de esa juventud que ha querido perder a los demás, metiéndolos en droga, introduciéndolos, y eso ha venido a través de los cárteles bien fuertes de las drogas.
En realidad es alarmante. Todos nos sentimos muy inseguros a raíz de tanta matanza.
Que mucha gente dice, si los cárteles mexicanos se metieran aquí en Costa Rica, no, los cárteles mexicanos ya se metieron. ¿Ya? Entonces, conforme ha crecido la demanda de drogas, ha crecido la oferta también, y también han crecido los grupitos de narcotraficantes.
Costa Rica ended 2017 recording its highest ever murder rate. Now, according to preliminary data, the Central American nation of 5 million saw approximately 603 homicides last year. That's up from 578 in 2016. Authorities blame score settling between gangs and drug trafficking for the increase.
Al Jazeera's Andy Gallacher joins us now live from San Jose, Costa Rica. Welcome to the stream, Andy. I want to start here with this Facebook comment we got from Ruben, who says, I'm concerned that this is partially a result of gang-related violence from neighboring countries spilling over, as people from those countries have often used Costa Rica as a haven from their own authorities. So some pontificating there from Ruben, but I want to know your thoughts. Why are we seeing this rising number now?
Well, very basically, it's because those traditional routes where cocaine came from have changed. Traditionally, they went over the Florida Straits. They used various different routes. Now it's coming through Central America. And I have to say, this story first piqued my interest back in 2013. I began to hear these reports of drugs entering into Costa Rica, of gang members joining with cartels. So I went up to the border with Nicaragua and saw firsthand what locals told me were boats of drug runners going up and down the coast. I heard stories of people finding big packets of cocaine on the beach, or, poor youth suddenly having gold watches the next day. So it's been happening since around 2012, steadily ticking up over those years. But obviously 2017 was historically the largest number of murders they've ever seen. And we're 2 weeks into 2018 now, and we've already had 25 murders. So it's averaging out to about 1.6 murders every day. But to put things into perspective, and I think this is important, Costa Rica is a very safe country. Remember, people here talk about Pura Vida, the pure life. It's known for waterfalls, zip lining, volcanoes, and overall it is very safe. If you look at the Northern Triangle, Nicaragua, El Salvador, and Honduras, in 2015, those three countries combined had 17,000 murders, and their murder rate per 100,000 is around 103 compared to the 12.1 or whatever it is here in Costa Rica. So I think that's important to put things in perspective, but things are on the rise, and it is worrying people, as you saw from the people we talked to here on the streets in San Jose.
And I was just looking back at that report you did in May. Oh, goodness, 5 years ago, almost 5 years ago. And I'm just wondering if authorities, the police at that time, had an idea that this may well be the problem coming up.
I think they did. I mean, what you have to remember about Costa Rica is, it's so peaceful and stable here that they disbanded their army in 1948. I think the big challenge for the police forces here are to really get a grip around something they're not used to tackling. They're not used to dealing with gang violence. They're not used to dealing with losing their youth to the cartels because there's money there for them. So what they're talking about here are a couple of different approaches. And remember, the general election, the presidential elections are coming up next month. So some of the candidates are taking very different approaches to this. There's talk of involving the youth more in cultural projects and getting them away from these gangs in any way possible. But they really need to get a handle around this because it is worrying people on the streets and it isn't something they're used to doing. I did speak to the police when I was up near the border with Nicaragua, and they showed me some of their training videos. So they have been aware of it for the last few years. It's just since the time I was here before, and I've been a few times in between, those numbers just keep going up, and it is really becoming something of deep concern to ordinary Costa Ricans.
You mentioned the upcoming election campaign. We got a comment on that from Anna on Facebook. She says a lot of people don't seem to be paying attention. We're in the middle of an election campaign and it's focused on keeping gay people, she says, from having their rights. Our political environment is centered around whether or not aspiring politicians support gay marriage or not. So in her view, she gets the feeling that politicians would rather keep the general public and the media focused on that issue rather than providing solutions to the issue of crime, drug trafficking, and money laundering. Have you talked to people who feel similarly? Do you think enough people realize what the rates are looking like?
I mean, I think you saw from just a random collection of people we talked to on the streets here in San Jose that it's at the forefront of a lot of people's minds. I mean, if you're a parent and you've got a young child, it's a big concern because the people in 2017 that were murdered are between the ages of 17 and mid-20s. So essentially this country is potentially losing some of its brightest and youngest people to the drug cartels and to these exchanges and fights over territory and fights over money ultimately. So the gay marriage thing has played out here as a fairly big thing. People are talking about it because it was a ruling that came from outside of the country and that they have to abide by. But I think the closer we get to these elections next month, the more this topic and how to approach it and how to tackle it will come to the forefront.
Andy, we're going to leave it there. Thank you for joining us today on the stream. Take care.
And to our community, if you have more stories you'd like us to cover from the region, please let us know with hashtag AJStream. And now from San Jose to Ramallah and the occupied West Bank. Recent approval of more settlement homes by the Israeli government has angered Palestinians.
Israeli occupation give us until 25 of this month to demolition our part from our village. We need your help to stop the displaced, the demolition, everything.
For the Israeli settlement in the West Bank, big effects not just on the peace process, and also there is a big effects on Palestinian life in the West Bank. It's convert the Palestinian city into big jail for Palestinian, and it's hard to transport between the Palestinian city in the West Bank. I think when Netanyahu say that he believes in two-state solution, he means that one state for Israelis and another state for settlers in the West Bank.
So far this year, Israel has approved the construction of more than 1,000 settlement units in the occupied West Bank. That's according to Peace Now, an NGO that tracks and analyses developments in the settlements. Palestinian Foreign Minister Riyad Maliki criticised the plan, blaming the United States for giving the green light to Israel to do whatever it wants with Palestinian land. Now, of course, you remember that in December, US President Donald Trump announced that the US would recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, a move that caused international outcry and condemnation from the United Nations.
Al Jazeera's Imran Khan joins us now from Ramallah. Welcome back to the stream, Imran. I want to start here on YouTube. So we asked the question that you heard from Femi earlier that the minister asked, has the U.S. given Israel a green light for settlement homes? He says yes. We asked that to our community. Leonard Phillips here on YouTube says, you're joking, right? The U.S. has been green lighting Israel for decades. So that said, I want to move over to Twitter. This is what we got from Kareem on that topic. He says, without the dismantlement of settlements and eviction of the settlers, there is no possibility for peace in occupied Palestine. What do those two things have to do with each other for our audience who may not know?
Well, what you're really looking at is whether settlements actually are an obstacle to peace or whether they are a destruction of the two-state solution. They're both very related issues. Now, the more settlements that get built, the more facts change on the ground, the more Israelis that move into the occupied West Bank, makes it much more difficult for the Palestinians to declare a state for themselves. And that's really what I'm really interested in. The piece that we're working on right now is about settlements and what they mean. Now, what does it mean for a Palestinian to live near a settlement? And what does it mean for an Israeli settler to move to a settlement from some very comfortable place in the United States and to actually come to the occupied West Bank? And I have to say, this piece was actually inspired by Ahed Tamimi, the 16-year-old who slapped an Israeli soldier. That video went viral, and she's currently in Israeli military custody. When she was about 4 years ago, she said a quote that really kind of stuck with me when I heard it very recently. She said, as a child growing up, I used to look across at the settlements and see kids swimming, kids going to school. I saw these kids just having fun in their playgrounds. And I, if I took a wrong turn, would get harassed by Israeli army soldiers. I might get arrested. My family might get arrested. We might be attacked by Israeli soldiers. And so I really wanted to do a piece that looked at what it meant to be a Palestinian living next to a settlement and what it meant to be an Israeli settler living in a settlement. And I have to say, one of the things that really struck me, and we've reported this before, is there are two sets of laws in the occupied West Bank. The first one is for the Israeli settlers. They come under Israeli criminal and civil law. So they get to go through the civilian courts within Jerusalem. But the Palestinians, they come under military law. International human rights groups have said that military law is actually unnecessarily harsh, and a lot of Palestinians who are faced with very severe sentences for very minor crimes.
Ask for it. Imran, there's something here on your Instagram account which links back to you talking about Ahed Tamimi, and it links totally to that story. You took this picture, you posted it. Tell us a little bit about what we're seeing here.
Well, that was a peaceful protest at Nabi Saleh, which is Ahed Tamimi's village. We were all up there. I was watching the speeches go on, speeches by the father. It was actually Baba Tamimi, the father, who was speaking at the time when suddenly the Israelis rained down tear gas canisters. The Israeli army came in. I looked around, and I have to say there was no provocation from the Palestinians. In fact, earlier in the day, the Palestinians have been saying to us that they were looking for a peaceful, non-violent movement. And this was what the theme of the speeches was. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, these canisters came in. That really angered the Palestinians, particularly Palestinian young people, who the only thing they have to fight back with is rocks. They started throwing rocks, and that's when things escalated. That white smoke that you saw in that picture is the thick cloud of tear gas. And this is just something that happens every week within the occupied West Bank. Whenever there's a protest, whether it's peaceful or not, the Israelis use quite severe crowd control methods to disperse the crowds.
All right, Imran, thank you so much. We're looking forward to seeing your reporting, and we appreciate you being here on the stream. And we go from Ramallah to the streets of a nation angered by the brutal killing of a little girl.
So the murder of 7-year-old Zainab has jolted all of Pakistan, and rightly so. The picture of her lying in a garbage heap became viral online very quickly. And unfortunately, this is not a one-off incident. Riots ensued in Kasur soon after her body was found, because the city has been susceptible to a child sex abuse scandal that people came to know of in 2015. And the fact that this issue persists in the region even today shows that the government really hasn't done much to eradicate the problem.
Zainab was just 7 years old when she was kidnapped, raped and murdered in her hometown of Kasur in northeastern Pakistan. Her death sent hundreds into the streets calling for justice. Her parents reported her missing a few days earlier, and many say that police failed to act adequately. The city has faced a spate of abductions, sexual assault and murders.
The hashtag Justice for Zainab campaign has been trending in Pakistan for more than a week now, but people online have complained about the government's lack of reaction. Amir writes, Chief Minister took notice when social media, civil society, and the general public raised their voice. The campaign has also been commented on by several notable people. Malala Yousafzai tweets, heartbroken to hear about Zainab. This has to stop. The government and concerned authorities must take action. Our community has also been following the story closely. Mohsen writes, this is the 12th incident that's happened in a short span of time here. Child abuse and rape, a very serious issue, particularly in India and Pakistan.
Joining us from Islamabad, Asad Hashim is an Al Jazeera online correspondent, and in Lahore, Mohammed Gibran Nasser is a political activist and lawyer. Gentlemen, it's good to have you here. Thank you for joining us. Gibran, I'm just going to share this tweet from your Twitter feed where you're showing a visit with the family, Zainab's family. What did you find out? What was it like being with them after this tragedy?
Well, my visit wasn't the first one over there. Hundreds of people from all across Pakistan have come and visited them. And I think that has somewhat and should have helped somewhat them be composed again with their emotions, though one can only fathom what a family is going through after that. However, what I would like to say, because you mentioned the outrage Pakistan is going through right now, that certain victims and certain images do come to symbolize injustice, and it happens all over the world. We saw the body of that child, Aylan, which was discovered on the shores of Turkey, or Nirbhaya, the woman who was subjected to a brutal gang rape in India, or Trayvon Martin, which kicked off the Black Lives Matter movement when his killer was acquitted, and similarly Zainab, as we see here. But these symbols do not mean that this is the first time such an attack or such a tragedy is taking place, nor does it mean that this is the most brutal or the most gruesome one. It only means that this is something we have to confront now, and we can't shy away from it anymore, because this is not just capturing our collective imagination, but also questioning our collective humanity.
So Asad, I wanted to share this tweet with you we got from Shmaila. She says, I think the investigation into Zainab's case and others before it have resulted in a complete failure of the state in its ability to dispense justice to those most vulnerable. And she says she's not very hopeful in this case. Why do you think that is? Because I know there are others out there who feel exactly as she does.
I don't blame her.
Well, this is for Asad, but we can hear your thoughts right after Gibran. Go ahead, Asad.
Sorry to interrupt, Gibran. I think this is really, that is one of the main issues that we've seen here coming forward with social media and also with the protests being so widespread, is that child abuse is nothing new in Pakistan in terms of the headlines, and the data is all out there, and the numbers are out there. In fact, in this very town in Kasur 2 years ago, there was a huge child pornography ring that was unearthed that had abused hundreds of children. This was going from children who were as young as 5 or 6 to preteens and to teenagers as well. Now, in that case, which was about 2.5 years ago, we have not seen any progress at all. There have been a few arrests, but there have been no convictions. And most importantly, the families of the victims feel like that justice really hasn't been done. And one of the main stories that came out of that, and we've been hearing about it progressively over the last 2.5 years, is that the families of the victims say that, listen, once the media attention dies down, the police kind of lose interest in following up on the case. And in fact, before the media interest started, they refused to register cases. So this question of the media interest and this focus being on Kasur right now is very good. But the question really is, to me, what happens next? Does this pressure remain sustained? Do we see any kind of action from the police and the investigation authorities? Right now, they're very much under pressure. There was a hearing in the Supreme Court today where the where a senior police official was kind of held to task for the fact that very little progress has been made for the investigation. But you know, what happens a month from now when the next big story comes in Pakistan, whether it's a political scandal or anything else?
Gibran, go ahead. What were you going to say?
See, I don't blame the person who's commenting that not showing enough faith, because this was a 13th incident in the past 12 months. And up till now, by the way, even after Zainab's case, 2 more incidents have been reported where male children were sodomized. And this was the 7th dead body which was discovered. And I would differentiate it from the sex scandal or the child pornography racket, which has been mentioned earlier, because that was being conducted as an organized crime in an area 20 kilometers away from the city. These incidents, the past 12 months I'm talking about, the 15 incidents, usually refer to a trend of either a serial killer or a group which is not using it for any monetary or any organized crime for that matter, but just picking up children, raping them, throwing away their bodies. And that brings into the question not just our laws and not just lack of policing, but also brings into the question on how much our community is sensitized to this issue and how much reform do we need. We are hearing many calls of execution and public executions and death penalty for the guy who did this to Zainab, but I think that's an easy way to write off a
Gibran,
guilt.
hold tight for a moment. There's something you say that, and I'm just picking up something here for some reporting from The Independent. This is Zainab's uncle, and he says here, our demand is that the murderer should be arrested alive. Because there are some circumstances, Asad, correct, where if people decide that they know who it is, they then take justice into their own hands.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we've seen that in Pakistan in a number of cases, particularly recently, and most worryingly in the largest city of Karachi, we've seen the police authorities actually encouraging that kind of mob justice or lynching. Usually that's in the case of robberies or mobile snatchings on the road. But it is something that we've seen a lot of. I think what that gentleman may also be referring to is something that I heard out of Qasur from both police officials and from members of the community, saying that in those previous 12 cases that we heard about, there would sometimes be cases where if the complainants were able to point out a suspect that they believe to be involved in the crime, the police, and again, this is all allegedly, but the report is that they would then carry out what's known in South Asia as an encounter killing. They would go out and actually kill the suspect rather than arrest them and then try them, because the feeling was from the point of view of the family and perhaps the police as well, that once it enters the court system, it's not necessarily going to go anywhere.
Which could be why you have some people calling for the death penalty once the suspect is found. This is Bina, and she says, people think that the death penalty for Zainab's murder will deter everyone else from this crime, but it would only make them more determined not to be caught and to kill their victims so there are no witnesses. Pretty morbid there, but she says what's needed instead is long-term policy and planning that will make things better for children and prevent other children from becoming victims. What that looks like is via this comment on YouTube. Amy says, education, 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 education. Gibran, is it that easy? And really, what does educating children have to do with catching murderers?
I'll firstly quickly respond to one thing. See, one part of the argument is that killing people may be the reason because people don't have faith in the judicial system and they think the person is going to walk off free. But another thing has happened in Qasur in the last 12 months. 4 encounters have taken place, and after every encounter, a person has been killed, and the police has announced that we've got that serial killer who's abducting and raping children. And every time a new incident has taken place. So now people want the person caught alive and brought to court so that they can ascertain whether this is actually the killer or not, rather than just shooting someone, killing someone, just to come out and send out a message that we solved the case. Now, when we talk about education, we're talking about not just reforming our education curriculum, where we are teaching our kids how to protect themselves from unwanted sexual advances, but also sensitizing the parents, because this dialogue hasn't taken place ever in Pakistan, where the parents also need to know on how to respond to their children, where children are comfortable and confident to come to their parents. And when an incident has happened where a child has come after having gone through some kind of such an experience, the parents are certain that the society will support them, because unfortunately, being a patriarchal society, like many other countries, we suffer from a misplaced sense of honor, where we think that it's going to bring up a bad name to our family if it's found out that some member of our family was molested. And if I just contextualize it on how difficult could it be in a conservative patriarchal society to talk about it, to talk about abuse or child abuse or sexual abuse, one can just look at the campaign of Me Too and Time's Up, where perhaps the most celebrated, well-known Hollywood celebrities are coming out after decades because they didn't have the confidence in society to come out and talk about such abuse. So compare that and contextualize that. So Pakistan, instead of just focusing on the punish, do focus on that. But we need to talk about reforms, and that's the part which we as activists need to do. That's why I was in Qasur collecting facts about the case, so we can go to courts and ask from them that what are we doing with the tax money? Why isn't our education curriculum, why isn't our tax money going into public service messaging, discussing this, opening up the conversation?
Gibran, I can hear your passion. I can hear that you are determined to do this. In a sentence, do you feel that this is a moment where Pakistan will change? In a sentence.
Pakistan has had many moments and had lost many moments like this, and this is one we need to hold on to.
All right. This isn't just about one little girl. I want to show you one other story that has its own hashtag, which is Justice for Batul, a little 6-year-old girl also found in a rubbish heap after being raped, and she needs immediate medical care and therapy. You also see that story and many others. So this really is a time where Pakistan is looking at itself and how it looks at child protection. Thank you, Asad. Thank you, Mohammed. I hope that you'll keep us updated on how this story develops.
And to our community, let us know what you'd like to see on the stream. Pitch us with hashtag AJStream. Until next time, we'll see you online.